Good morning. Good morning, members of the MAG Transportation Policy Committee. This meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when you're speaking. For those participating by Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a request to speak card located on the information table in the hallway and give it to the MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table in the hallway. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members. Linda? Not Linda.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Rock Arnett.
I am present.
Thank you. David Barry.
Present.
Thank you. Doug DeClusen. Mayor Gallego.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Giles. Mayor Hall. Mayor Harkey. Charles Humantle. Cheryl Lombard. Councilmember Littlefield.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Manfredi.
Here.
Thank you. Jackie Meck.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Orsborn.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Here.
Thank you. Mark Reardon. Councilmember Schaefer.
Present online.
Thank you. Councilmember Stipp. Mayor Wires. Mayor Weiss.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Wheatley.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Woods. And Chair Sellers.
Present.
Is there anyone I have missed? Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Will you now please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Next is the call to the audience. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. We have received no speaker cards. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website 1 hour prior to the meeting. Staff, do we have any written comments for this item?
Chair, no public comments have been received for this item or any other item on the agenda.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes items 4A and 4B. Does any member of the committee have questions or request a presentation on these consent items? Seeing none. Have we received any request to speak cards for the consent items?
Chair, no requests to speak cards were received for this item.
Is there a motion to approve consent items 4A and 4B?
Mr. Chair, this is Ken Weiss. I'll make the motion.
Gallego, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, we need to do a roll call of people online.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Councilmember Littlefield.
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Manfredi.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you. Mark Reardon.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone I have missed? Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next agenda item is item 5, the 2022 annual report on the status of the implementation of Proposition 400. This item will be presented by Steph Stearns, MAG Transportation Analyst 3. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion.
Thank you, Chairman Sellers. Pleased to be here with you this afternoon to present this item for information. Next slide, please. The Prop 400 annual report is a requirement in place by state statute. It takes a look at the Proposition 400 program according to each modal life cycle program, and it also addresses project status, financing, and the outlook for implementation. There is a copy of the report at each of your places today for you to take home. We do have extra copies if you would like. It's in your agenda packet, and it's also linked throughout this presentation, so no shortage of reports available. Next slide, please. So we'll get right into our revenue projections, starting with our half-cent sales tax funds. Our future half-cent sales tax revenues are projected to come in approximately $2.5 billion over the lifetime of the program. This is about 17% higher than what we were forecasting last year, and this is due to strong growth in the retail sector. Next slide, please. Moving on to our federal funds. Future federal fund revenues for the remainder of the program are forecasted approximately $1.1 billion. I would like to point out a very significant portion of that is FTA discretionary funds in this light blue shown on the pie chart here. Our partners at the City of Phoenix and Valley Metro have been very successful when competing for high capacity transit projects nationwide, and that's why we do see such a large influx of this discretionary money. Next slide, please. The Freeway Lifecycle Program, over the past year, we had 3 projects completed with 7 underway. I will take a moment here to note that the Prop 400 report represents a snapshot in time. It looks at the status of projects as of July 1 of 2022. So that's why you see projects on here such as the 202 and Lindsay Road interchange or the SR 24 are listed as underway. That's because as of July 1 of this year, they were underway. In next year's report, they will show as being completed in FY 23. Next slide, please. Moving on to the arterial life cycle program, we had many projects underway. We've highlighted a few on the screen for you. This top photo is Northern Parkway, Dysart, and El Mirage Road overpasses. Shown here at the bottom is the intersection of Southern and Stapley, an arterial life cycle program project in the city of Mesa. Next slide, please. Moving on to the transit life cycle program, the TLCP is split in between bus and rail. On the bus side, we saw implementation of Route 515, a new express bus, as well as 135 vehicles programmed for purchase. This includes expansion and replacement vehicles of the transit fleet, everything from a standard 40-foot bus down to a paratransit van. On the rail side of things, we saw the completion of the Tempe streetcar. The South Central Extension and the Northwest Extension Phase 2 were actively under construction, and the Capital Extension project is in the planning phase. Next slide, please. Shifting gears a little here to talk about what Prop 400 has accomplished in its entirety, we have seen a total of 410 corridor miles of freeway and highway projects, 252 corridor miles of arterial projects, and 7.6 million bus transit revenue miles in FY22 alone. So you can expand that many times over, and that's what we've done for the transit side. Next slide, please. Looking forward, MAG will continue to review the program. We will make adjustments as needed to projects and the program. And we are working to identify a path forward to the ballot so we can have an extension of Proposition 400. Next slide, please. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, that concludes my presentation. This is on your agenda for information. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? From any members that are online?
Yeah, this is Vince Manfredi from the city of Maricopa. I do have a question. With the current landscape that we're facing now at the state legislature and Governor Ducey's veto of the ability to place Prop 400 extension on the ballot, do you think that changes in the upcoming legislative session? Are we going to find it easier to get this done? Or is it going to be a bigger fight?
Chair Sellers, members of the committee, I'm pleased to pass that to Eric to answer.
Very smart.
About delegation. Thank you, staff. Mr. Chair, members of the Transportation Policy Committee, we're still working on multiple strategies to find a path to the ballot. Certainly working with the 2023 legislature is one option, or the 2024 legislature. There's still a slight chance that we could have a special session. We're still evaluating that. And so obviously leadership is pretty well set now in the legislature, both in the House and Senate. The path is not easier, to say the least. So once again, we continue to look at alternative strategies to get to the ballot.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Yeah, let me just comment that Mayor Weiss and I are working pretty diligently on any options that we might have to get this done as quickly as possible. We know that has to be a top priority.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is item 6, System 2022 System Performance Report. It will be presented by Brian Rubin, MAG Transportation Planner 3. And this item is on the agenda for information and discussion. Brian?
Sorry about that. Next slide, please. The System Performance Report is a federally required document that we view as an appendix to the RTP. This year, we've taken care to integrate color schemes and visual content to help strengthen that RTP connection. On the screen, you'll see required elements of the document, and I'm happy to say that our report exceeds these minimum requirements. Next slide, please. First published in 2020, our now annually produced System Performance Report provides readers information on transportation performance at the federal, regional, and corridor level. More specifically, it lists all of our federal performance measures, contains regional level summary statistics and bottleneck information, and longitudinally tracks performance on a series of commute corridors. In addition to those items, we produce special interest chapters on interesting or unique facets of the system. Prior reports have examined traffic impacts of a Thursday night Cardinals game on Loop 101, taken a deep dive into the nuts and bolts of our transit system, and this year's report examines equity using a wide swath of our available data tools. Next slide, please. On the screen, you can see the 5 families of federal performance measures. All of these are represented in this report with the exception of PTASP, which has not yet been taken through MAG's policy committees. We hope to do so early next year after receiving the data needed to create regional targets from our Tier 1 transit agencies. Next slide, please. When reporting on regional mobility, we look into both recurring and non-recurring congestion. Recurring congestion is the type of congestion that we experience regularly and predictably, such as freeway bottlenecks during peak travel times. Non-recurring congestion refers to congestion caused by one-off items like special events, roadway incidents, and weather. Next slide, please. For corridor level performance, we report on a series of commute corridors that we began tracking back in 2011. While most of these corridors have shown an increase in travel time over the years, we do have one exception. The Loop 101 Price-Pima corridor has shown improved travel times. I would like to note that this corridor was the site of a large capacity adding project that was completed back in 2016. Also like to point out that while we do have data from 2020 and 2021, we've decided to omit those years as we don't feel that the data is representative due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. For the 2022 report, we took a comprehensive look at accessibility through an equity lens, looking at a myriad of variables ranging from crashes and fatalities to grocery store access by transit and automobile. Using Title VI guidance and 2020 American Community Survey data, we identified 11 different analysis zones with varying levels of percentages of population that were part of a minority group, below the poverty line, living with a disability, or having limited English proficiency. The most notable observation from our analysis was the trend between percentage of population below the poverty line and the rate of serious and fatal injuries. The two increased together almost in lockstep. Next slide, please. As I touched on earlier, other special topics covered have been impacts of a roadway widening on Loop 101 from Loop 202 Red Mountain to Shea Boulevard, traffic impacts of a weeknight Cardinals game, done a comparative analysis of federal performance measures and targets among peer agencies across the country, as well as transit system performance. Next slide, please. That I would just like to say thank you for your time and attention today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brian. And I will just mention that the addition to the Price Freeway has been a blessing since we've started the Broadway Curve project. That I don't know how we could survive that without that addition on the price. Any comments, questions from the committee? Any online? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 7, overview of interchange improvements at Interstate 10 and Baseline Road. Quinn Kiwi Castro, MAG Transportation Engineer, will present this item. It is on the agenda for information and discussion.
Thank you, Chair, members of TPC. Next slide, please. Today, I will be providing an overview of the interchange history, including previous studies on I-10 and this interchange, as well as an update on the planned improvements and the status of those improvements. Next slide, please. The interchange at I-10 and Baseline Road is one of the most congested in the region. More than 60,000 vehicles pass through this section each day. The interchange was originally constructed in 1967, and last improvements were made in 1994. So it's a standard diamond interchange configuration currently. Next slide, please. While it is located within the city of Tempe, which is shown here in purple, it is directly adjacent to City of Phoenix, which is shown here in tan, and Town of Guadalupe shown in orange. The interchange is surrounded by several notable developments, including the old Fry's Electronics, Arizona Grand Resort and Spa, and the Arizona Mills Mall. So plans were recently announced to redevelop the old Fry's Electronics site into a Costco business center. Next slide, please. One of the biggest challenges with this interchange that has significant impacts to traffic operations is the number and proximity of access points. Within the 1 mile segment between 48th Street and Hardy, there are 9 signalized intersections, including the interchange, and 27 unsignalized access points. One of the most noticeable full access points is at Wendler Drive, which we'll get into a little bit later. It's located less than 300 feet from the interchange. And for reference, ADOT's current policy is to prohibit access within a ½ mile of a new signal. Next slide, please. So given the traffic volumes and congestion at the interchange, there have been several studies to identify potential improvements. The I-10, I-17 corridor master plan, and then concepts were further refined as part of MAG's 2020 I-10 Baseline Road Traffic Interchange Feasibility Study. Next slide. So first, the I-10, I-17 corridor master plan. Next slide. So MAG, in partnership with FHWA and ADOT, launched the spine study to develop a corridor master plan for the I-10 and I-17 corridor in February of 2014. The corridor is referred to as the spine because it serves as the backbone for transportation in the Phoenix metro area. In fact, the corridor handles about 40% of all daily freeway traffic. Next slide. One of the catalysts that led to the initiation of the spine study was the preliminary scoping and design work that was undertaken by ADOT as part of the I-10 near-term improvement study, which looked at widening and other improvements on I-10 between the I-10 Loop 202 State Route 51 mini stack interchange and the I-10 Loop 202 Santan Freeway interchange. The concept being evaluated at that time greatly exceeded the amount of funding available as part of the Freeway Life Cycle program. In addition, there were new ideas for meeting travel demand that emerged and a need to better link improvements with planned work along the I-17 corridor. As a result, the spine study was initiated to identify the long-term vision of the corridor, as well as the scope for the future I-10 near-term improvements. Next slide. On May 24th, 2017, MAG Regional Council accepted the spine study, and on March 28th, 2018, representatives from ADOT, FHWA, and MAG signed a planning and environmental linkages statement summarizing the findings of the project. There were a number of recommendations that arose from the study, including the modernization of I-10, I-17 to current design standards, the addition of at least one lane throughout the entire corridor, expansion of managed capacity along I-10 between I-17 and US 60, and from I-17 or on I-17 from I-10 to Loop 101, improvement of 24 of the 31 traffic interchanges throughout the corridor, the addition of 5 direct high occupancy vehicle ramps and new interchanges, an enhancement to bike ped connections across the corridor at 20 locations, including 9 new structures. Next slide, please. So several of the spine study recommendations were then incorporated into the Prop 400 Freeway project scope as part of the 2017 Freeway Life Cycle Program rebalance. This was approved by MAG Regional Council September 2017. And one notable project was the I-10 Broadway curve improvements, which included scope that had been originally included in the near-term improvements project. Next study, or next slide. And next study. The spine study recommended major upgrades to the I-10 and Baseline Road interchange to address capacity, congestion, and safety. Specifically, the study recommended a conversion to a DDI configuration, in addition to the construction of a new bike ped bridge over the freeway to serve active transportation users traveling along Baseline Road through the interchange. The study also recommended further evaluation of these concepts. Next slide. Improvements to the I-10 and Baseline Road interchange were not included as part of the I-10 Broadway curve project for several reasons. First, additional study work and evaluation was still needed to identify a preferred concept, with a particular emphasis on bicycles and pedestrians. Hundreds of millions of dollars of federal dollars had been programmed for improvements on the I-10 mainline, and that necessitated an aggressive project delivery schedule. So the addition of the Baseline Road improvements could not be accommodated. Federal funding is awarded to states on a use-or-lose basis. And then lastly, construction of the I-10 and Baseline Road interchange improvements will be focused on the arterial roadway and will not significantly impact the I-10 mainline. Next slide. So the I-10 and Baseline Road traffic interchange feasibility study. Next slide. In 2019, MAG initiated the I-10 and Baseline Road traffic interchange feasibility study. So again, the further evaluation of the interchange concepts with a specific focus on multimodal safety and connectivity. The study found that the full access provided at Wendler Drive, which is located less than 300 feet from the interchange, poses significant operational challenges. As a result, a reconfiguration of Wendler Drive was recommended. Specifically, it was recommended that Wendler Drive curve west and intersect Baseline Road in line with Arizona Grand Parkway. Next slide. The realignment will impact parking for the former Fry's Electronics site by dividing the parking lot in half. The study identified both the standard diamond interchange shown here. Next slide. There's that realignment of Wendler. And when coupled with the realignment of Wendler Drive, this will improve operations and should be advanced for further development. Next slide. So this is the diverging diamond interchange, the second alternative as part of that study. Next slide. Showing that realignment of Wendler Drive again. Next slide. Project status and planned improvements. Thank you. Funding to construct the interchange improvements at I-10 and Baseline has been identified in phase 1 of the Prop 400 extension plan. As part of the fiscal year 2022 Freeway Lifecycle Program update, funding for region-wide advanced right-of-way acquisition was increased to explore the possible acquisition of the former Fry's electronic site to accommodate that Wendler Drive reconfiguration. ADOT made an offer to acquire the property, but the owner indicated they were not interested in selling it. ADOT is not able to move forward with formal condemnation without having completed project scoping and environmental work and the identification of a funding source to construct those improvements. Following the unsuccessful attempt to acquire the property, a portion of that funding was reprogrammed to initiate the first phase of project development, scoping and environmental work. ADOT has advertised for a consultant team to conduct that work and anticipates that the project will formally kick off this fall. Funding to construct the improvements is dependent on the voter approval of a continuation of our dedicated half-cent sales tax in Maricopa County. And without a clear path to the ballot, ADOT will be unable to advance the project's development past the scoping and environmental phase. Next slide. Chair, members of Transportation Policy Committee, this item is on your agenda for information and discussion.
Thank you, Gwen. And I'll just mention that really appreciate this information because I think we all recognize that I-10, both in the east part of the county and the western part of the county, is a major congestion problem for us. And it's very helpful to understand the things we're doing to address those issues. Any questions, comments from the committee? Mayor Guy.
Quinn, thank you so much. This is an important project for us in Phoenix as it is for Tempe, the host community. Could you talk a little bit about what was the trade-offs between going over the freeway with pedestrian bicycling versus under the freeway? And then also what is the plan for the Fry's electronics? Should we move forward with the acquisition or ADOT move forward with it?
Sure. Chair, members of TPC, thank you for that question. So in the 2019 study that was completed in 2020, there are a lot of conflict points between the vehicular traffic and pedestrians and bicyclists at grade. So meaning that there are a lot of opportunities for crashes or incidents. And so the thought was if that could be elevated to go over the freeway, you would reduce that conflict and result in less injuries in that area. And then as far as the communications that we've had with the former Fry's electronics owner, there have been discussions both with ADOT and with MAG. They are understanding and aware of these improvements, as is the Costco Business Center, who would be their tenant.
Wonderful, thank you. And in some of our work at the City of Phoenix, we are pushing pedestrian cycling along the canal system as well. So hopefully there'll be multiple opportunities. Well, it's a frustrating intersection and it will be exciting to move forward as soon as
If we go back about 3 slides. There you go. Oh, so you can see on the top right-hand corner, there's a blue line. So that's a proposed shared use path that would have connectivity through the intersection at Arizona Mills and then to a potential bike ped structure that crosses the interchange. So it would continue to the north and there's another path along the canal further north.
So it's not, the path would not be near the Highline Canal, it would be on the northern side of the freeway?
So there would be a path on the, on the Highline Canal side, but then it would also cross and then have connectivity further to the north as well. So you would have that east-west connection as well as north-south.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Just a quick question if you could go back to that slide, as far as the impacts to the property owner, whether it's Fry's or the future Costco, because that's at grade, correct? It's not raised.
Correct.
And as far as the impacts to that property owner, what's the potential for them as far as cutting their parking lot in half?
So chair, members of TPC, again, a good question. It would essentially bisect their parking lot at this time. They are the property owner for that whole development on the corner there. So the former Fry's Electronics and then the Burger King and Fry's gas station are tenants of theirs. And so it would involve a complete reconfiguration of their parking lot. If you look at the 2 purple triangles that are shown, those are proposed access points. this will be further evaluated in the ADOT study that's going to kick off this fall.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from anyone on web? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now the person that has the most boring job at MAG, Nathan Pryor, MAG Policy and Government Relations Director, will give us a legislative update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Policy Committee. Eric did a good recap of kind of our look ahead, but I'll touch on that in a moment. So of course we had an election, both in congressional races, state, local propositions. So we're still kind of examining the changes ahead of us. But with that, I'll start off by talking about our congressional composition. Of course, we're looking forward to working with the new Congress when they take their seats in the new year. In fact, we're currently refreshing our portfolio of MAG issue papers for the upcoming congressional meetings. We plan to be there for our national conferences, MAG staff included, as well as you are. You will be. So we'll be sharing those issue papers with member agencies when complete. So hopefully you're talking about our regional issues. So look ahead for that. I do want to talk before I go to Proposition 400 extension. That's on a Pinal County transportation issue on Proposition 469. So just by way of reminder, the purview of this body, this committee, is on within Maricopa County. However, we are in a bigger system with our neighbors to the south. In fact, they are our member agencies. 6 member agencies are in portions or all of Pinal County, including Apache Junction, Queen Creek, Gila River Indian Community, City of Maricopa, Florence, and of course, Pinal County. So Proposition 469 was an extension of the half-cent sales tax in Pinal County. As of this morning, that is currently trailing 49.1 to 50.8. There's some more decimal places out there, so really close. But we're going to continue to monitor this and have conversations with our Pinal members. In fact, that's already started. Looking at the impacts to, of course, our regional transportation system, which is even beyond outside of Maricopa County. We are part of a system. That is part of the MAG planning area. So much more to come on that. We're going to keep monitoring that and talking to our members in Pinal County as to where that effort goes from here. So I did not want to lose sight of that one. Turning to our state, of course, we're seeing Governor-elect Katie Hobbs has been announced just not even 48 hours ago. So we're looking forward to having conversations with her office, looking at her agenda going forward with her administration, looking at the Arizona legislature and the Senate, seeing Senator Peterson emerging as the president of the Senate, Senator Tehran as Democratic leader. The Senate has announced committee chairs. So relative to this committee, the TPC, we're seeing Senator Farnsworth has been advanced as the chair of the Transportation and Technology Committee. Turning to the House, we're seeing Representative Toma has been elected speaker. Then on the Democratic side, seeing Representative Cano being voted as the Democratic caucus leader. Regarding chairs of respective House committees, we're still awaiting that. So we'll be watching for that composition of chairs for House committees. Then, of course, clearly Proposition 400 extension is top of mind, as Eric Anderson had mentioned. We're continuing our conversations, our ongoing conversations with current executive and legislative leadership for our near-term opportunities. As Mr. Anderson mentioned, those include a potential special session. So we'll update member agencies on those developments, keeping that sustained effort alive and well during this current legislative and executive branch tenure. Beyond that, of course, we're attentive to the dynamics of the governor-elect in incoming legislative leadership, as has been mentioned. We're looking forward to meeting with incoming leadership and staff in both executive and legislative branches. We'll work to share the importance of transportation investment in our region with those offices, of course, emphasizing economic opportunities, air quality impacts, and mobility if the voters are not allowed to take up this choice on a ballot to continue our half-cent sales tax for transportation in Maricopa County. With that, Mr. Chairman, I do want to thank our member agencies for your sustained continued involvement. I know this has been a long ongoing journey. So just thank you to our MAG member agencies, stakeholders, business community, really pushing this effort through. With that, Mr. Chairman, of course, as Eric Anderson had noted, there's no shortage of potential scenarios. We are kind of planning and plotting, if you will, what comes next in terms of what's in front of us immediately, but also looking at the new legislature. Of course, as a member, as an agency, this Transportation Policy Committee is simply kind of one body of work that we address. Of course, Regional Council and the member agencies address more issues in transportation. So we'll be looking to share and advance those and inform on those issues with the new governor-elect and legislative leadership in the coming days and weeks. Mr. Chairman, that completes my presentation on the bill.
Thank you, Nathan. And yesterday I heard an announcement that Apple plans to have TSMC manufacture their chips. And I think we have a strong story to tell about why extending Proposition 400 is so critical, because we have talked with TSMC and they're telling us that they're going to be in trouble in 2 or 3 years unless we get this system in place to support them. And so these kind of things are critical. I appreciate all that you've been doing, but a lot more to do. Yeah, Mayor Weiss.
Mr. Chair, just for the committee's just education, I continue to meet with MAG staff every 2 weeks and more if needed, kind of going through the updates that Nathan is talking about, along with John and Audra and Eric and Amy, and kind of mapping out strategy. And we were a little bit of a standstill up until yesterday when election was called, for whatever that's worth for right now. But we'll continue to discuss those things and kind of move forward with strategy. I had the opportunity yesterday to meet with 5 West Valley Chambers of Commerce and kind of talked about how their efforts will impact what we're trying to do. So we'll keep on doing the Jack and Ken Roadshow as necessary, and we'll get this path done no matter whether it's special session or whether it's going into 2023. But I think we all hope that a special session is kind of where we land on this. So appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I just had a comment as well. I appreciate you bringing up the Prop 469 with Pinal County. The impacts to Queen Creek are 65 million that would have been dedicated to our new State Route 24. So I believe it's just over 2,000 votes it's failing by. So very significant for Queen Creek. I don't know. Mm-mm.
Other questions? Yeah, Brock.
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering it, and may have missed it. What's happened to the money that was collected previously on that Pinal County? Do we know what's happened to that money?
They are, it's going back to the entities that collected it, and they're supposed to be dispersing it. Heather, I'm trying to recall as far as the status where it's at right now.
Figuring out what that program is going to look like from a rebate standpoint. They're like Wheatley's correct that
and I believe they have those entities have the ability to donate it, essentially donate it back, but how to truly make sure it gets to the taxpayer, very difficult to do, right? So.
Can I jump in for a second? It's Vice Mayor Manfredi, City of Maricopa. I serve on the Pinal Regional Transit Authority also.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so on that question comes up a lot. And we're talking about $87 million that was collected over the last 5 years, and it's being held by the Department of Revenue. So the Department of Revenue has stated that they have no time or effort or no ability right now to figure out every taxpayer that paid it. So of course, it's going back to the actual businesses that collected it as TPT. But there's over There's thousands of businesses that paid that TPT tax, that half-cent sales tax. So trying to figure out how, when, where, and all of that good stuff, the Department of Revenue said will take years and over 30 new employees, which they don't have the resources for. So what we're working on at the PRTA is working to allow the companies themselves to sign a letter saying we don't want the money. We would prefer the money goes to CAG, which is Central Arizona Government's nonprofit, and then they can give the money to CAG, and then CAG can use it for projects that were originally intended, at least portions of it. That would decrease the tax burden on those businesses and blah blah and all that good stuff. So we're working on it, and we're working on a second fix. So that's one of the fixes. The other fix is a legislative fix that says that the money collected will go to Pinal County to use at Pinal County projects and not back to the actual taxpayer, or not back to the actual businesses that collected the tax on the behalf of the taxpayer. So there's a lot of steps that are going to be followed over the next couple weeks, months, years to get it back. But any business that doesn't claim it within the next 3 years, about 5 years from now, the money will flow back to Pinal County to use for projects. But in reality, we have to find a fix for it sooner. And with Prop 469 failing at the polls, there's a lot of fun that's going to be happening in Pinal County when it comes to transportation in Queen Creek, as well as the city of Maricopa, the 347, which is partially funded in Prop 400 extension. So there's a lot of work that's going to be done for transportation. But the people of Pinal County simply said no to the half-cent sales tax. Some did not understand the issue at all, I believe, and didn't understand that when they look at Maricopa County roads, it's paid for by a tax that gives you guys the 303, the 202, the 101. A lot of those roads that are out there that people so enjoy are paid for by a sales tax. But a lot of education will go into it, and we'll bring it back probably in a year or two and talk again. But for the 87 million, there's an ongoing discussion and a lot of legal work to be handled, but we are working on it and working our way through it.
Thank you, Christian. And I'll just mention too that, a lot of the economic development that's going on in this region is out in your area. So
Yeah.
Improving those roads is pretty critical for us as well as you.
Believe me, we understand. We're sitting on a road that sits, the SR 347 sits entirely on Gila River community property. But half of it's in Maricopa County, half of it's in Pinal County. And it's a state road, of course, SR 347, but it's probably the worst road, one of the worst roads in Arizona. And with the failure of Prop 469, it really halts indefinitely any additional lanes that we can place on it. Thankfully, through MAG and through others, we've been able to work on some fixes with ADOT and some work at the Riggs Road overpass, as well as the I-10 expansion will fix the Queen Creek I-10 interchange to put in the Virgin Diamond and a couple other things. So we see some relief, but we're going to have a long discussion, I guess, about the SR 347 and the impacts it's going to have on development.
And I guess I'm really surprised that proposition is not passing. The original proposition that got tied up in a legal jam by a pretty wide margin.
Yeah, it passed pretty well. And then in the city of Maricopa, we passed it 65% for it, right? It failed in places like Apache Junction. It failed in places like Casa Grande, as well as Coolidge and Eloy, Eloy, not Coolidge, but in Robeson Ranch area, which is, we just announced in Pinal County that new P&G plant, which is supposed to be on the north-south corridor, which is being funded by Prop 469. So how does that impact that P&G plant? Because it's going right on that road, and that road does not exist, and there's no funding for it to exist. So a lot of stuff happening in Pinal County that I think some people put a bad feeling on the word, but it was just ignorance at the polls, where people just didn't understand what they were voting for. And unfortunately, it came up as a failure. We have a lot of new people that moved to Pinal County that, they just moved out of other places. They came here and they said, no tax. I'm like, okay, well, no roads. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, and we're working on it. And hopefully in the next 18, 24 months, we bring it back and we pass it. But it's really going to have to take a lot of education.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? We have a lot of work to do. Thank you, Nathan. Okay, next on the agenda is request for future agenda items. Here we go. There you go.
Today, this week, we celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which has made such a difference in our region. It includes potential funding for regional rail. We have now a governor who is a supporter of regional rail, so I just would hope we could continue to have that conversation. There are some fairly imminent deadlines for planning dollars that we'd love it if this body can discuss.
Okay, and I will mention, I attended a meeting yesterday at the legislature called the Urban Mobile Air Committee. And what they're looking at is things like air taxi and a lot of movement to expand our ability for transit into areas that don't have the infrastructure to support it. I suspect it's a long ways off before we accomplish anything like that on a serious basis, but I think it would be good at some point in the future for this committee to hear that presentation. Anything else? Okay. This meeting is adjourned.
In Mesa, in 26, the